You might have seen one of these before, or sort of. It's the Genesis GV80 and it's the brand's first SUV from only a few years ago. But since they brought this out, there's been the smaller and more popular GV70 and the electric GV60. Now there's this, the GV80 Coupe. This blingy big dog wants to take on the likes of the BMW X6 and Merc GLE Coupe with its sloping roofline. So I've put on my linen shirt and come down to the launch of this car at the Mornington Peninsula in Melbourne to ask one question: should the Euros be worried?
The GV80's range now consists of just one drivetrain with 3 variants, 2 SUVs and the new SUV Coupe. The GV80 is also now a lot more expensive than before, but Genesis says customers almost always opted for the expensive options like the luxury pack, which is now standard. The traditional 7-seat GV80 starts from $130,000 before on-road costs, with a standard second row of 3 seats plus 2 in the back. Stepping up from that, the 6-seater starts from $133,000 and has 2 captain's chairs in the second row instead of the 3-row seats, meaning more room for 1 fewer people, and a nice little center console. Finally, the new body style in the range, the Coupe, loses the 3rd row thanks to its sloping roofline. It comes only as a 3-seat second row, meaning it's a 5-seater, and it's also the most expensive variant of the range, starting at $136,000. Strangely, for the GV80, less is more when it comes to seats. Each $3,000 step up in price means 1 fewer seat. What links all 3 is that they're spec'd up to the eyeballs. There are just about no optional creature comforts in the updated GV80 because they're already here. There's plenty of leather upholstery, heated and cooled massage seats in the front plus heated and cooled seats in the rear, with plenty of electric adjustment for all of them. A heated steering wheel, which is also electrically adjustable, also heats the armrest in the center console of the front 2 seats. There's an 18-speaker Bang & Olufsen sound system, wireless phone charging, and of course there's the massive 27-inch OLED screen encompassing the multimedia touchscreen and the driver display, which looks incredibly expensive to replace or fix. The GV80 looks mostly the same as it did back when it launched, save for a few small tweaks that will give away the updated version to proper anoraks. Any Genesis spotters will note the SUV now has a double mesh grille, 2 lines instead of 1, plus larger air intakes and micro lens array lights that perform a dynamic welcome pattern on unlock. New 22-inch wheels at the sides and a chrome side strip give it away in profile, while at the rear a redesigned bumper hides the exhaust exits. But of course, the Coupe is much more obvious, with its sloping roofline joined by tweaks like a bolder grille inlay, single strong lines rather than the mesh crest design from the SUV, and more air intakes again. Its 22-inch wheels are exclusive to the Coupe, and at the rear a more aggressive design is finished off with visible sports exhaust exits. It's no bad thing that the GV80 hasn't changed significantly, as it hasn't really aged much in its few years, and its design language seems to do a decent job of appealing to both traditional and modern-minded customers.
In here, it's properly plush, and there's a couple of things I wanted to show you because they stand out quite significantly in this car. The main one being this 27-inch single screen that encompasses the multimedia and the driver display. Over here, of course, it's a touchscreen and it's pretty simple to use. There's big buttons for everything and some odd settings with things like the mood curator and a car wash mode as well. In terms of the comfort, like I mentioned, this seat is heated and vented. The steering wheel is also heated, and so is this armrest. When you have the seat heater on, this armrest heats up as well, which in some areas of the world is pretty good, otherwise kind of useless. Underneath that, there's another kind of cool gimmick, which is a UV sterilization thing in the center console, where if you put your phone or your glasses or whatever in there, it's supposed to kill the germs on them, which I'm not sure how often that'll get used, but it's kind of neat. In terms of the ergonomics, everything in here is quite easy to use, which is great. Even this touch screen, which controls all of the climate stuff, it's pretty easy to use, it's clear, and it's almost always on. Underneath that, there's a little phone charger where I've got my phone with the script for this video on it right now. Plus, my seat is electrically adjustable, so is the steering wheel, telescopically. I found a really comfy seating position, and there's a good tilt and leg support underneath you, so if you're pretty much any height, you'll probably be able to find a pretty good position. This being a large SUV, the second row is suitably spacious. I'm sitting here behind my own seating position and I have heaps of legroom, heaps of knee room. Even my feet are pretty comfy, even if I tuck them under the driver's seat. Plus, the sloping roofline doesn't seem to have done too much to headroom. There's also plenty of amenities back here. You've got this armrest here with its own little storage space and a couple of cup holders. Plus you've got your own climate controls back here for the second row, and each seat back here can be heated and vented as well. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that they're also almost as adjustable as the front seats. You can adjust the tilt under your thighs for more support. You can also lean the seat back or forward for a little bit more comfort on a long trip. This being the coupe, it's only available as a 5-seater, but in the SUV you can have a 6-seater with 2 captain seats in the middle row and then 2 seats at the back, or you can have a 7-seater with seats like this in the middle row and the other 2 seats at the back as well.
There's also a pair of rear seats in the third row of the SUV, which are pretty well equipped and roomy enough as far as third rows are concerned, with some electric adjustment for the seats, but it would be a stretch to call it a luxurious space. Boot space is fairly generous, the SUV boasting 735 litres with the third row down, or 1097 with the second row also folded down. The coupe has a smaller 644 litres with the second row up, or 1033 with the second row down. Neither will be great for transporting large bulky items, but can handle plenty of luggage for trips away. Genesis has limited the engine options in the GV80 to 1, doing away with the diesel and offering only the twin turbocharged 3.5 litre petrol V6, which makes a decent 279 kilowatts and 530 newton meters. That figure is unchanged for the engine since the model's launch in Australia. The engine makes its peak torque from a relatively low 1,300 RPM and is paired to an 8-speed torque converter automatic. Interestingly, the SUV has a claimed 0 to 100 sprint of 5.6 seconds, but the coupe, which is lighter by 20 kilos at a maximum weight of 2,325 kilos, is a tenth slower, according to Genesis, with a 5.7 second sprint. It's a pretty traditional engine offering for a large SUV, but not offering any kind of electrification, especially when parent company Hyundai is making strides in that space, means the GV80's engine feels a little bit stuck in the past, much to its fuel consumption's detriment. It's a good thing the GV80 has an 80-litre fuel tank because boy is it thirsty. Combined fuel consumption claims for both SUV and coupe are 11.7 litres per 100 kilometres, and normally on a press launch we'd not be able to put that figure to the test. However, Genesis offered us a GV80 to drive home for a few days, and after a couple of 100 kilometres of mostly highway driving, I managed 12.4 litres per 100 Ks. That's tested from pump to pump, with the trip computer telling me it was sitting on 12.2. If you're buying a GV80 for long trips, that could be a fairly realistic figure for you, but if you're going to be driving mostly in the city and suburbs, expect to regularly see figures north of 13 litres.
When it comes to the update, the GV80 feels pretty familiar to drive if you've driven it from before the update. But the difference is that the coupe feels probably a little bit less comfort focused and maybe a little bit more sports focused than the SUV does. Genesis says it's taken on the global tune for the Genesis GV80 and there's no specific Australian tuning. But in the SUV, it still feels really plush. The suspension does a very good job of soaking up big bumps while also making sure that on rough, like gravelly, corrugated roads, there's not a lot of vibrations and stuff coming into the cabin. Getting out of the SUV and into the coupe, it's pretty clear that the suspension is a little bit stiffer. It was immediately noticeable driving along things like gravel and bumpy roads, where the coupe started to feel a little bit more like it was sort of performance focused, even though it isn't actually any faster. In fact, Genesis actually says that the coupe is a little bit lighter, but a second slower to 100, and they didn't really have an explanation for that. When it comes to encouraging you to drive quickly, the GV80 does not do that, but that's okay because it fills its niche really well. As a big comfy SUV, the GV80 is great, and even in coupe form where the suspension is a little stiffer, it's pretty comfy and feels like it would be good for long drives on highways or even in semi-windy roads. The coupe also gets a different drive mode. It gets Sport Plus, which dulls the ESC just a little bit, but we haven't really had a chance to test it properly here on public roads and at this launch. The twin-turbo 3.5 litre V6 is the only engine option you can have in Australia now, but that's not such a bad thing. It's pretty responsive and has more than enough power at about 279 kilowatts. In terms of some of the peripheral stuff that affects you while you're driving, things like the tech and the safety stuff in this car, nothing's too distracting. Everything, as long as you're using the screens in a kind of safe way, is pretty easy to do, and none of the driving assistance really intervenes in a way that you wouldn't expect it to. It's all pretty subtle and it feels quite well tuned. The twin-turbo 3.5 litre V6 is now the only engine you can get here in Australia, but that's okay because even though it's probably not the best on fuel, it is pretty responsive and has more than enough power and torque, even if on paper those figures look a little bit more like they would encourage you to drive a little bit more dynamically than they actually do.
The GV80's safety equipment has mostly remained the same, bar an upgrade in the advanced driver assistance systems, including new versions of its highway assist, lane follow assist, remote smart parking, collision avoidance, and a driver monitoring system. The GV80 comes with 10 airbags, including a front center side airbag and curtain airbags for all 3 rows. It was tested by ANCAP in its pre-update form in 2021 and was awarded the full 5 stars, with high results in both adult and child occupant protection. For a premium brand, it's pretty hard to beat Genesis's warranty and servicing offering on paper. That's because for 5 years, everything is covered for free. 5 years of unlimited kilometer warranty, 5 years of free scheduled servicing up to 50,000 Ks, 5 years of access to Genesis's concierge service and its courtesy cars, plus 10 years of roadside assist if you service your car with Genesis. Servicing intervals are every 10,000 Ks, so you'll likely even get your full 5 services for free even if you hit 50,000 Ks before 5 years are up. The roadside service tops out at 5 years free if you stop servicing your car with Genesis outside its warranty period.
I don't think the big German brands have anything to worry about just yet, because while the GV80 is very good at filling its niche, and that is being a big, comfy SUV, it doesn't really encourage you to drive it like a sports car. But Genesis's sub-brand, called Magma, is probably going to land in Australia relatively soon. And when it does, I reckon that's when keen drivers will start paying a little bit more attention to things like this.